Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting edition of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Vaughn Smith, and this is our Cisco Cloud Fundamentals series. And in this episode, we're going to look at storage network devices, Cisco-specific ones, that is. And here to help us is the one and only Mr. Ronnie Wong. How are you?
I'm doing well, Vaughn. Thank you again for joining me as we continue on into our realm here of Cisco Cloud Fundamentals. We're heading towards that home stretch where we only have a few episodes left, and now we have to get, really specific in Cisco, of course, the devices out there for their storage networks, right? And so we are going to be talking about a whole series of different family of devices. We're going to talk about the MDS devices. We're going to take a look at the Nexus series devices, and then the UCS Invicta as well, which is actually, of course, end of life, but you still have to know about it. So we're going to do all that. And all this really is for the sake of the exam. So, Vaughn, this is one of the most generic portions of the exam objectives that they list, that they just say, hey, here's the series of devices that you need to know about. Now, the problem that they have then when it comes down to the exam is, Vaughn, on the exam, it's not enough to just be generic about it, okay? What it comes down to is that you really need to understand some of the specifics of these devices as you prepare for the exam as well. So we're going to take a look at these different families of devices, make sure we can kind of point out the differences and even talk about possible scenario-like situations that you might also see this stuff in too.
So we're talking about how many drives they have, or how much power, all the specifics. That has the charts that list all the things.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. A lot of tables of stuff. Yeah, at least to a point, right? So we're not going to go into the areas where they're insanely specific, but it does seem like the exam is geared towards that particular person that is going to be working in pre-sales engineering at times, especially about the Cisco hardware. So what does that mean for you and me? Well, since it's actually going to be something that you have to be familiar with, we're going to at least go over that and make sure that you understand, and I'll show you, of course, where I found the information for you so that you can also take a look at it yourself as well, okay? So, Vaughn, what we're going to take a look at first is we're going to talk about the idea of the MDS devices that Cisco has, and these are our multi-layer types of SAN switches. Sometimes you also hear about the term multi-layer directors is what you also hear as well. But we're going to talk about those first, and then we'll move on to the Nexus series switches, and then ultimately the Invicta is what we'll actually be talking about as well, okay? So, Vaughn, the very first series, when we talk about the MDS family, well, remember that when we start talking about storage network, in that sense, right? We're talking about things that connect to SANs, and for us, those are Cisco types of switches, is what they're actually considered here, okay? So you might hear the term fabric switch, you might hear the idea of the MDS, you might hear the Nexus. All these are actually devices inside the data center that help with the east-west type of traffic that we've been talking about, that connect the SAN, of course, to devices that need them and allow for super quick traffic in between. So the first series here on these MDS devices that we want to jump into is the MDS 9700. Now, Vaughn, the great thing is Cisco's documented just about everything that there is to know about their products, okay? So I just went to Cisco's website. Actually, I picked up a web browser, and I just typed in, Cisco MDS 9000 series, and it brought me up to a comparison chart, and then down at the bottom there were multiple links that I could actually pick the series. And the first one that we're going to talk about is the 9700 series. They're multi-layer directors that they call here. And Vaughn, these are the top three models, actually the models that we are going to focus in on, which is the MDS 9718, 9710, 9706. These numbers almost appear like, they don't really mean anything, Vaughn, okay, when you take a look. And then all of a sudden you get this table of a bunch of information here. And I'm leaving it small on purpose because we're not going to focus in a lot on a lot of these things, but we do want to focus in on some of them. So, Vaughn, the two that I'm really going to focus in on, at least for the 9700 series, is what we call the line card slots and the supervisor slots as well, okay? So, Vaughn, the number up here, MDS 9718, it doesn't really look like it means anything to us. And first thing I was like, why don't they pick random numbers, 97, 10, 18, 6, whatever it is. But when we start taking a look here, you actually do start seeing a pattern, okay? So Vaughn, notice line card slots. So this is a chassis, a single chassis. And what it tells you is that there's actually 16 slots that we can put individual blades into so that we can actually add in what we call line cards. And there's 16 of those. But notice there's also supervisor modules. And if you add up what?
Oh, if you
Supervisor?
add up 16 plus 2, that's 18.
18, yeah.
And 8 plus 2 is 10. And
Yep.
what's the other one?
It's the 4 plus 2 is 6, yeah. So that kind of helps us out at least to memorize that idea number. And the whole goal behind us knowing just stuff like that. Now, don't get me wrong. It even tells you like how many ports there are per chassis, right? So notice this one, 768 ports. That's a lot of ports, okay, that you can have in a single chassis. Then MDS 9710, 384. And this one's a reasonable 192 ports, okay, when we have that. But all those stuff is pretty much, by comparison here, stuff that's going to be common across each one of them. But what we want to make sure that we understand, especially on these 9700s and the series here, is think about scenarios in which you might need to actually choose one over the other. So Vaughn, in this one, I think we have to actually go with the 9700. Scenarios where you think about the idea of expandability or the current capabilities, right? So let's take for an example that you're actually putting something together as far as a sales package, right? For somebody that says, hey, I need to actually be able to have a particular type of server here, okay? A multi-layer SAN switch, but it needs to be able to support, let's say, the idea of 10 line cards in it, okay? Well, Vaughn, if I actually go and take a look at the idea of 10 line cards, I realize something. That's immediately knocked me out of what? These two over here, okay? But what if I'm actually told I need a max of 6, okay, line cards? So I know I'm not going to do any more than 6, okay? Well, then I realize something. This one would actually be knocked out, and this one would be knocked out. But that means that, hey, a max of 6, well, I might be able to do 4, and I'd have to tell somebody that. But I could have a max of 4, or I can actually go to 8 here. So actually, I'm lying to you. This would actually be the one instead. So yeah, it would be the 9710. That would be the one that would be a max of 6 for us. So kind of realize something like that in terms of expandability. Those are all scenario-like types of situations in which are very keen for someone that's actually working with Cisco equipment to know, here's why you would choose this device over this device, okay? And Vaughn, I would love to just sit there and go, Vaughn, all you need to know is the MDS 9000 series. You'll be fine for the exam. I wish it was just that easy and that true, but I can't, in good conscience, go, all right, Vaughn, that's all that you need to know. And then you go, oh wait, look at that. There's look, individual types of numbers on there, and oh yeah, that's right, it's MDS. Oh, they're all MDSs. Well, now what do you have to do? Yeah, you have to actually be able to understand where you're defining something like this. So take a look at all those comparisons, and that's what I focused in on, at least for the expansion here, of thinking of something like that when you start doing it. Now, Vaughn, that's not the only series of MDSs that there are. There's also the Cisco 9500 series too. Now, Vaughn, this one, in theory, should not actually be on the exam, and the reason why it's end of life, but even though it's end of life, Vaughn, I can't tell you it's not on there, and that's the key here. So if we take a look at this, we'll see if it follows the same pattern. Oh, look at that, Vaughn, 9506. That's 4 and 2, yep, oh, that's 6. Let's take a look at this one, 7 and 2, yep. 9, 11 and 2, yep. That actually looks like it's doing exactly what we need to for that 9500 series device, okay? Now, if you are actually taking a look at this particular one, right, I would still focus in on that idea of the capabilities of what you actually need, okay? And here, Vaughn, we know that those other ones, they kind of can give us what we might be able to need, right? That 9718, okay, seems to actually give me some of the, at least in terms of the abilities, right? For the line card slots, that would actually fit the same as the 97 or the 9513 here. So now all of a sudden, that's when you start looking and going, hey, what is actually available for us that we might want to take a look at as well, okay? So in this one actually has, well, some different things that you can do in terms of the supervisor modules that are actually available, and that's when you go to the interfaces and modules here, and you start seeing that these actually offer different things, such as a 16-port storage node service. Here's actually 8-port 10 gigabyte fiber card or fiber channel over Ethernet modules. You name it, all of these are actually possibilities that you might be able to take a look at and do as well, okay? So you're probably not going to get that deep into it because, like I said, this is end of life. In theory, if nothing else, it's something you should be able to rule out as you actually get ready for the exam too. But it is part of that Cisco MDS series. Okay. Now, Vaughn, and there's actually two more series that we have, which is the 9200s and the 9100s, but there's only one 9100 switch, and so they combined it all together underneath the MDS 9200s here. Let me see if I can zoom in on that, okay, so that we can see. So 9250, 9250i, 9222i, okay, is another one, and then there's the 9148. So notice even though there's 9100 series, this is pretty much the only one that people kind of go to, okay? So on this one, if I scroll down, I'm actually looking for what are some of the things that might actually be, oh, there we go, okay? So notice that some of them that don't have the capabilities, you're starting to see here, okay, where they have this dash instead of what you see. So it might be where you start taking, upgrade license up to 40, 16 gigabit fiber channel connections. That's a possibility that you might have to actually think about, right? Are you actually running fiber channel or not? Okay. Well, if you're actually not running fiber channel, well, this one will actually end up working for port expansions for you. Okay. But notice that this one on the 9148, you're probably not going to be able to do that in terms of fiber channel. If I continue to scroll down, you can also see under smart storage services, notice that there's none over here. Okay. But then as you go to the advanced traffic management here, vSANs. Okay. So once again, if you're now looking for something that supports vSANs, well, this might be the switch for you. These support vSANs and something that we call IVR, interactive voice response, and up to 16 links for port channels. Okay, so that is what also gives us that ability to aggregate those together. Notice if we're actually asked about this right here. Okay, fiber channel over Ethernet. Which of these switches support fiber channel over Ethernet? Well, notice that would actually go all the way back up to the 9250. Okay, so I would take a look at these comparisons and try and see if you can spot one that's different. So let's say that you're running iSCSI. Well, that would rule out what? This one as well, okay? And, not this one though, okay? But this one would actually do that. So you can see that there's actually some ways that you can rule out and say, here's the one that I need in this particular situation, okay? Once again, give yourself scenarios. Is it supporting fiber channel or you don't have fiber channel that you have to support? Can I still do this with this switch? You kind of get the idea, okay? So those 9200 series there, so those are the MDSs. Those multi-layer director switches are also considerable right there too. Now, Vaughn, that is not the only family of devices that are actually designed for our data centers. Probably the most popular ones would, of course, come underneath the series here that we call the Nexus family, okay? The Cisco Nexus series switches. These are all what we call chassis types of switches as well. Notice that you see 9500s here, and there's a 9504, there's a 9508, and there's a 9516. Now, Vaughn, this one does not take the same line numbering that these take. If I take a look at line cards, I start seeing something, supervisor slots, whereas the MDS has actually combined them both together. This one bases it only on
the line card
on the
slots,
line cards,
not the combined supervisors. But it looks like obviously supervisors are 2 across the board.
Right. Yeah. So on this one, Vaughn, this is where all of a sudden it's like, wow, it's not consistent, and that's why people do have some confusing numbers about something like this. Okay. These are all very capable, and when you actually are looking for something that all of them can support, okay, so if you're needing support ACI, you might actually think about, oh, look at that one, okay. These also support ACI as well, and that may be something that you want to actually pay attention to. Down here at the bottom, I know it's kind of weird, but power supplies, do you have redundancy in your power supplies? Let me see if I can zoom in. We might have to kind of full screen that for a moment. So this one supports up to 4, up to 8, and up to 10. Well, that's another thing that you might actually, again, kind of be able to differentiate and do what you need to. But the expansion is pretty much still the key here, okay? The 9516, if I needed to actually have more than 8 particular line cards, we'd go to the 16. If I had a max of, let's say, 7, well, then, you might go, oh, I can't do that. But let's say that I had a max of 9 or 10, or 8, I should say, right? I could actually do up to 8 here. So just kind of realize that those are some of the capabilities and some of the ways that you can distinguish that as well. Okay. Now, in the Nexus, there's also the 9200s, and this is a lot, okay? These 9200 series were very much all of them, these are kind of the key here, okay? So Vaughn, here it actually kind of helps me out and just about everything that I need right up here at the top line, okay? So I don't think that they'll get this specific, but you never know, okay? If I am looking for top of the rack switches, Vaughn, okay, I'm going to look for a Nexus 9200. I don't care which one except for this one over here at the end, the 2300YC. This is only an access layer switch, okay? But the rest of these, though, top of rack, aggregation, aggregation, top of rack. Well, if I'm looking for something like that, then I know that these other switches are pretty much going to be the key. The other thing that's also capable here, of course, is something else that we are now seeing in the Nexus family, which, of course, is the support of VXLANs. Okay? Notice that this particular series also supports VXLANs in bridging and routing. And on this Nexus, notice that some of them actually support up to 100 gigabit ports. Pretty hefty. And you start talking about the idea of being able to do something like that as well. Okay, so 100 gigabit ports. Let's see, anything else here? They also, of course, all run the Nexus OS. So remember that too. And those are also key if you're actually supporting something like that as well. There's also, of course, the Nexus 7700. Now, this one is by far probably the trickiest one, and that is because the series here is 7700 and 7000. And notice the combination here, Vaughn, that they actually do across these, okay? We have supervisor modules. One has 3E, 2E, 2E, 2, and 1, okay? So, yeah, maybe you're going to be able to do this, but I wouldn't worry about that too much when you start taking a look at the idea here, okay? But what you're actually taking a look at a lot of times is just understanding. So, for example, the Nexus 3 or the 7700 with Supervisor 3E, okay, there are some features that these support, especially the Nexus 7700s and 7000. And they're right down here towards the bottom half of this. Virtual device context. Remember the virtual device context for us is being able to take that one physical switch and then make a virtual device of that and make multiple virtual devices. In other words, allowing tenants to be able to gain access and manage their own switch here. So most of these support the idea of you actually creating 8 additional virtual device contexts and then one admin virtual device context. In other words, be able to manage them all. Okay, so you can create up to 8 separate instances, and then you can actually do that. And the only one that's different here, Vaughn, is that Nexus 7000 with Supervisor 2. This one actually you can create maximum. Oh, let me get that out of my head here. There we go. Maximum of 4, and then you have one admin VDC as well. Okay. Now, if you're only running the 7000 with none, you don't actually get an admin VDC at all. You just get to run 4 VDCs if you chose to. Fabric extenders are also a big one. So remember that for us when we talk about the idea of the fabric extenders, okay, which we did talk about when we actually went over these Nexus devices a bit. We showed you that the idea of the fabric extenders allow us, of course, to be able to have that extra capacity that we need to connect multiple switches together. And when you do it, 3,072 ports, that's a lot. 64 fabric extenders. You name it, this one has 32, can give you a max of 1,536 ports. That's a lot of different ports that you can also be able to see. So that is that Nexus 7000. So I would pay attention to something like that if I were actually taking a look at the idea of which of the following Nexus models can do virtual device context. That'd be something else to actually take a look at as well. In the Nexus 3000s, now Vaughn, this is kind of the weird one. And the reason why is that there are a ton of Nexus 3000 models that are actually out there. Now for us, this comes down to VXLAN, okay? And this is something that we want to make sure that we at least pay a little bit of attention to, okay? Notice, Vaughn, in the Nexus 3000 itself, the bare one, okay? No, okay? So the 34 or the 3040, 3048 here, it doesn't support VXLAN, okay? If I go to the 3100s, oh, look at that. There's a whole series of them. And these only support partial here, right? Only layer 2, bridging. So this will give us virtual extensible LAN capable here of really doing bridging. But then with the V and the Z's here, okay, they actually do bridging and routing, okay? So it looks like I'm going to try and go and do some searching here. So these actually do both bridging and routing. That's layer 2 and layer 3. VXLAN type of support. The Nexus 3200, both of them only bridging. Nexus 3400, bridging and routing. 3500, once again, let's see if we can find it. No, you won't actually get VXLAN capabilities here. And then also this one, yes, it is VXLAN capable. Now, Vaughn, there's a difference here between the ones that absolutely just tell you bridging, okay, and then the ones that tell you, oh, capable, okay? So notice the difference here. One actually says, yes, I can support it, okay? And the other one says, here's what I can do to support it, okay? So this isn't saying you actually get it automatically. It's saying that if you configure it, if you actually get it set up, yes, it is capable to do so. But you might have to actually purchase the correct firmware or iOS license to make sure that you actually get what you need to, okay? So that is the Nexus 3000 switches, okay? All right, so Vaughn, when it comes down to it, that pretty much is the Nexus series that we wanted to get into. And then the last device that I mentioned here, okay, is the idea of the UCS, the Cisco UCS Invicta series, okay? So notice there it is, the Cisco UCS Invicta series. And the only thing that I found on it, Vaughn, end of sale, end of life, okay? So this is another type of network storage device that's out there that we can also implement, but it has actually been end of life at this point. So the only thing that we want to do is make sure that we can associate this with some type of network type of storage. So the end of life date of sale, let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, so this one, as of the recording of this particular episode, about almost 4 years exactly. Yeah, so a few months before,
just a little,
just shy of 4 years. Okay, which technology in terms of cloud, period at all, 4 years ago, and they had already end of life this particular device. It's still called out on the exam though, so we at least had to make sure that you understood this.
It's like four years in cloud land is like 40 years.
It's pretty close. Yeah, the technology has changed quite a bit, even last 3 to 4 years here, and the expansion of it has just grown so much. But just make sure that you can identify a Cisco UCS with some type of network storage is what I would actually do. Now, Vaughn, all of this, right? If you want to actually dive deeper into it, and you're going to have to, those of you that go on towards your cloud admin, your administrator, for the CCNA and cloud, yeah, you'll probably have to dive into more of that. But at least at this point, make sure you know some of those salient points. I would spend some time taking a look at these documents. Don't look at it just for the ones that I pointed out, Vaughn, okay? But look at it and go, yeah, differentiations here. And if I were to have to pick one of these over the other one, why would I actually pick something like that? That's what I would actually choose to do. And at least be able to eliminate the ones that you don't need. So like if they give you a, like you need to support fiber channel, right? Or fiber channel over Ethernet. We showed you one of those where you go, oh yeah, this is the one that I would pick and not any of these other ones here, okay? So those are some of the capabilities, and that's the mindset you have to be in for choosing these devices. I wish I could just tell you, like I said at the very beginning, you just have to be able to identify, Nexus 9000 versus the 7000 versus, whatever else it is, okay? But no, on the exam, you're going to see that it's probably more detailed than you think it's going to be. I can't say any more than that, but that's pretty much what you're actually going to see here. But just kind of be ready for it. And you can always use your best friend, which is whatever your favorite search engine is. Type in those models from the exam objectives. You should download a copy of that from Cisco. And then see what you actually end up finding out and take a look at it from the standpoint that we did and try and understand and put scenarios into your head that you might see there, okay? So Vaughn, that is going to wrap up our particular pointer episode here on especially Cisco-specific types of storage network devices or network storage devices, whatever I've actually said, storage network devices. Make sure that you actually do point those things out, and that will help you out as you get ready for the exam.
And this is where I'd probably start printing out those pages and like kind of highlighting and circling and
Great
then
idea.
making my lists. And like you said, finding those like comparable operators,
right,
you want to say, and go from there. All right. Well, thank you, Ronnie. Thank you for joining us. But we are going to go ahead and skedoodle. And signing off for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Vaughn Smith.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.